Hello everyone and welcome to the Good Old Gamer. So today, the good Lord has put it in my path that I'm supposed to teach you guys about memory, and specifically the Gear 1, Gear 2 sort of stuff. I went ahead and talked about the Infinity Fabric Clock in the previous video. Links in the video description below if you want to learn a little bit more about the AMD side. But just today, off the back of my recent video, Celso from Cortex reached on out. He's doing some B-die tuning, and he was having trouble getting his DDR4 4000 B-die kit running properly. So I was just like, this is definitely a sign that I should probably go through this step by step. So this way we're all on the same page. Everybody here then understands what Gear 1, Gear 2, unlinked fabrics, that sort of stuff actually means, and why it's important for anybody buying a high-speed memory kit to understand this stuff, because if you just enable XMP with a high-speed RAM kit, you're actually going to get worse performance. So that's what we're going to be talking about here today. I'm going to show you guys how to identify these things to figure out if your memory is running right and how to fix it so this way you are getting the maximum performance out of your system. Trust me, it's just one more click past XMP. It's not really that hard. So let's go ahead and get on into it. Alrighty guys, so we're in the BIOS. I'm using my Z690 Steel Legend ASRock motherboard. I'm using the 12600K, the same setup that I used the other day. We're using the Patriot Viper DDR4. This is actually a 4400 kit. Right now it's running at 4000. I'm gonna go over here to OC Tweaker. As most of you guys, all you do is you just go to DRAM and you guys just hit XMP. So let's just go to auto and then XMP profile. This is actually a 4400 kit. It's the same thing as the DDR4 4000 kit from Patriot, but whatever. So we're just going to go ahead and run with this, okay? So we're going to do 4400. This is what most of you guys do on your systems, right? You just hit XMP and you go, and that's the end of it. So let's see how this turns out. Alrighty, so once your system loads on in, first thing you want to do when loading XMP, check CPUZ, because you want to make sure that your settings are actually working properly. So all you do is just go under your memory tab, and then see here we have the DRAM frequency, which is 1995. It's dual data rate, so ×2. It's DDR4 4000. And then as you can see here, the memory controller is only running at 1000 megahertz. What this tells you is, since this is half of this, that means we're only running, in Gear 2. And that means your memory controller frequency is running at half the speed than it should. So, all right, we still have all the same stuff here, but let's go ahead and run our latency test and see how this affects things. Because remember, we got 51 nanoseconds. If you saw the last video, I'll go ahead and throw up the screenshot here. This is what we got with it in Gear 1, just with XMP. So what happens when you're in Gear 2 on accident? All right, and this is the main reason why memory controller frequency is important. We lost about 3 to 4 gigabytes per second, and our latency jumped up almost 20, which is what? And next to 51, that's almost a 40% increase in latency, simply because you just enabled XMP, and it automatically kicks you over into Gear 2. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how to fix this. If you know for a fact that your motherboard can handle the RAM and everything, how to rectify this, at least on an Intel system. As I mentioned earlier, you can go ahead and watch my previous video. It is in the video description below. On the AMD system that I tuned memory, I'll show you how to do it on the AMD systems in that particular video. All right, so with XMP, you should be seeing something similar to this. You know, everything is set to auto. Now, on DRAM frequency, if you don't already know the maximum that your CPU can handle, if you don't have your voltages tuned in, which I'm assuming that you don't, the smart move is to go with something that you know will work. So unlike an Intel Alder Lake K-SKU, the smart move would be is to start with something like 3600 and then work your way up, and then you keep tuning till you hit a wall. As mentioned before, I couldn't get 4400 to go with the same settings that I can do 4000 Gear 1. So you basically start here and you just keep going till it stops working, and then you just back down and do stability tests if you want to overclock and tune. And if you just want to do the XMP thing, but you know for a fact that the speed will work, for example, I know DDR4 4000 will work, go ahead and set that in. All you really need to do to fix that memory clock thing is just go to the gear mode. On Asus, they call it frequency mode, and it's just 1-to-1. Most motherboards will call it some sort of like gear mode, and just change it from auto to Gear 1. So assuming your RAM speed is low enough that your system can work with it with XMP without anything else, so slower than 4400, for example, all you have to do is just change it to Gear 1. On the AMD systems, you just have to set the fabric to linked. Usually I'll say like F-clock, frequency sort of thing, somewhere's in this range in a similar type motherboard, and you just have to put it to synced. Or you can manually select the DRAM clock, and then you can manually select the F clock. I usually do it that way just so I know the motherboard doesn't do anything stupid. But anyways, this is all you really need to do, and I'll show you guys the difference just by flipping this over to Gear 1. Alrighty guys, so once we're back into Windows, same thing, go to CPUZ, make sure that your settings are actually the settings that you want. Now, I mentioned this in a previous video, but if you start setting some stuff and your motherboard decides to do whatever the hell it wants, that means you have a bad motherboard. And honestly, if it's still like functional, sell it off and get yourself a better board. I have had a few boards that just kind of did whatever they felt like doing, and I'm like, nope. It's just a big headache. Just don't deal with boards like that. Anyways, let's check our memory. So as you can see here, we have the DRAM frequency that is matching our memory controller frequency. Once again, if you have an AMD system, you want your DRAM frequency, they'll put it under Uncore, but it's actually your F clock. But it'll be the clock that's in this box right here. They should be the same. And we'll talk about the limits of certain CPU types, so this way you guys know where to set your memory here in a minute. But I do want to show you guys the latency test from just simply running this in Gear 1 versus Gear 2. All right, so I got my memory bandwidth mixed up. So the bandwidth didn't change. I was thinking of the Tune system. That one had like 63 gigabytes per second. But anyways, the latency here, we're down at 53.3 nanoseconds. It's a little bit higher than what I got the other day, but it's going to be within, a few nanoseconds, significantly lower than what we just saw. So as you can see here, that makes a huge difference if you accidentally leave that off. So just loading XMP is not going to work on high-speed RAM. So I know what you're asking, Chris, what's considered high-speed RAM? Well, it actually depends on your CPU. So we need to talk about each common CPU type right now out in the market because they're all going to be a little bit different. So for Skylake CPUs, you don't have to worry about it. The thing just won't post. If you try to push too far, it just doesn't post. So you don't need to worry about any of this if you're running Comet Lake on back. Once Rocket Lake hits, it will do the Gear 2 thing. Same thing with Alder Lake. Now on Zen, if you have a Zen 2 chip, it's probably anything over 3200. It will automatically kick it into the 2-to-1 ratio, which is basically the same thing as Gear 2. I mean, it's different, but for this conversation, it does similar things. So literally any DDR kit over 3200 for Zen 2, you're gonna have to pretty much manually set that thing in. And for Zen 3, anything over 3600 is going to be the same thing. It'll automatically kick it over to 2-to-1 because 3800 is not guaranteed. Most Zen chips will do it, but not every single one. 3600 will run on all of them. And this is the reason why they do it. Now, on the Intel systems, I can't speak for Rocket Lake. I'm not familiar with it. But on the Alder Lake systems, it's kind of the same thing. 3600 on the K SKUs and 3200 on the lock SKUs. So if you're running even a 3600 XMP kit on a, let's say, 12100, you're going to have to change the gear because not every 12100 can even hit 3600. And this is the main reason why these modes exist, is for people that buy really fast RAM, not knowing which CPU is going to work with it. So like, for example, if I bought the 4400 kit and didn't realize and didn't already know that about 4000 is where Alder Lake's going to cap out, I might be sitting here scratching my head going, what's going on? Now, in theory, most boards with Gear 2 should be able to push really, really high frequencies because it doesn't stress out the system. Same thing with the AMD system. So if you put on like 4000 or higher, which most Zen 3 CPUs just aren't going to handle, the cream of the crop can do 4000, but we're talking a very small percentage. It's just not going to happen. So if you loaded up something like DDR4 4000 on a Zen 3 chip, instead of the system not working, it'll work, but it's going to work slower. So this way you can go in and fix the stuff. So it makes sense why these exist, but at the same time, the community doesn't do a good job explaining this to you guys. So when I said in the last video, you want everything 1-to-1 on the AMD systems, you want your DRAM and your F-clock synced at all times. And on the Intel systems with DDR4, you always need that on Gear 1. I just showed you guys, it makes a massive difference. It's a world of difference. Celso was getting really frustrated. He was showing some really high numbers. I'm like, what gear mode are you in? And he actually got upset because he had to go ahead and change the gear mode automatically. I'm like, well, not every CPU can hit this. So like, I understand both sides of this. He was getting really mad about it. I think he's gonna bring it up in his next video. But this is information that probably hasn't been properly conveyed to most of you guys out there. This is really important. If you have high-speed RAM, and high speed is really 3600 plus, you have to double check this every single time you load that XMP to make sure it's working. Like I showed you, it's not that hard. Just run CPUZ, and if your DRAM and your F-clock or your memory frequency aren't synced, basically if it's not the same number, then you know you have to go into your BIOS and you have to tinker. Otherwise, you're gonna get an extreme performance penalty. So, alrighty guys, I hope this is helpful. Hope this showed you guys the massive difference. I mean, what, 40% laggier, approximately 35% if you wanna be generous. That's a big deal. So, you know, even just with XMP, you can get much better performance if you're like, oh crap, I'm running 2-to-1 or I'm running Gear 2. Poof, there you go. One little change setting in your BIOS and you just got like 35% better memory performance. You're welcome. So hope this helps you guys out. Hope this is clearer than how I explained it in my last video. And at the end of the day, I hope I saved you guys some money by making your current system faster so you don't need to upgrade. That's kind of the plan on this channel, to show you guys how to get that max value. So if you appreciate that type of content, please smash that like button, please smash that subscribe button and the notification bell, and please share this around. I think that this is information that a lot of people in the community don't know. I got a lot of comments on my last video where people just didn't get it. And I was talking at a level where I assume people have a certain familiarity with the BIOS, but I also come from an era in a PC gaming era where you have to go in the BIOS, you have to tune. So I'm trying to take steps back and show you guys everything one step at a time sort of thing. So let's share this around so we can get everybody on the same page. If anybody has any questions, you could just link them to the video. I really appreciate that. That really helps out the channel. But alrighty guys, that's really all I have for you here today. And I will catch you guys in the next video.